Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see you all. Um, I'm so happy to be here and to talk about development and fundraising with heart. I'd like to say in the beginning that it would be great. I have 15 slides just to give you an idea, but I would love to get questions or comments throughout. Because I'm sort of more looking at the PowerPoint and not at you, I'm going to be asking Devin to take questions on the chat, or if you want to raise your hand physically, or if you have that, if you know how to do that on Zoom. So Devin will be driving the comments, but you don't have to go through Devin. Also, you can just speak up. Okay, great. So my name is Janice Thompson. I live in Harpswell, Maine, which is a small community of 5,000 people, 10,000 in the summer. I work for, I'm the Director of Development and Operations for Harpswell News, which is a new nonprofit that we put together about a year ago, that publishes the Harpswell Anchor, which is a print newspaper. And well, I'll go into that in a minute. But anyway, for my background, I'm actually not a journalist. I'm a career development person. This summer, I'm celebrating my 35th year in development. When I was in Boston up until about 5 years ago, I was the first part of my career, I was working at MIT and Harvard. And then when my kid was born in 2002, I started doing some consulting. So I've worked for smaller arts and education organizations. And then I led teams, full advancement teams in the Boston Athenaeum, which is a 200-year-old membership library in downtown Boston. And I also led the whole advancement team for the Meadowbrook School of Weston, which is a K-8 school in Weston, Massachusetts. About 5 years ago, we moved up here to Maine to sort of have a better kind of easier lifestyle. And I was doing some work for the local land trust. And while that was happening, the current anchor, the old anchor, the Harpswell Anchor, that had been around for over 20 years, closed its doors. It was run by one man with freelancers, very small operation, but he couldn't make ends meet anymore. So we put together a group of people to sort of talk about what we should do next. And we decided on the nonprofit route. So the current iteration, again, we started last June, and our annual operating budget is about $220,000. You can see right in front of you, you're seeing that, right? You're seeing started operation, that slide.
We still see your intro slide, newsrooms fundraising on a shoestring.
Uh-oh. Because I'm moving it. I mean,
could you click through? There we go. Now we can see.
Can you see it now?
There you go. Yep.
Okay, so I'm just going to have to do that step in between. Okay. So this is how our revenue comes in. We are a small operation. We have a full-time editor. I am technically at 80%, and I handle the development side and the operations, the business side. And then we also have an office assistant who's hourly, works between 15 and 20 hours a week, and he is also our designer. We have a 10-person board. I think we have at least one person on our board on hand. So if she or they could, add something about the anchor, you could do that too. So we are a monthly print paper. You wouldn't want to start with a newspaper in this business, but because it had been around for a long time, we tend to be an elderly group of people in Harpswell. Maine is the oldest median age of its citizens in the United States, and Harpswell is the oldest median age in Maine. So we are at the heart of the most elderly community in America. And they tend to really like the print. And as I was saying, when I was at the land trust and the paper died, the land trust and the town and other nonprofits really felt its absence, because that was really the way that they heard, or they could get their message out. And it was really, so it closed for about 6 months, and then we started it back up. We raised a lot of money last year. I looked at the number last night. It was $324,000, and we had only started in June. And that reflects how much people really, really wanted the anchor back. We use the phrase, help us raise the anchor. So this year it's more of an issue around, well, now we've celebrated our first year and now we have to get it across that we really need people to continue their support. So I'm going to go do this. And then we're going to do play. Now, can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to start out with a question, because what I've noticed, and as I was looking through all of your titles, it does look like a lot of you have development jobs, and that's great. And what I'm finding also is that often these papers, these newsrooms get started, these nonprofit newsrooms get started by non-development people. They get started by editorial, and that's great. But often development sort of gets tagged on. So I was thinking that maybe there would be people who are not fundraisers. But the reason why I asked this question, and it's sort of like it's a rhetorical question, you don't have to raise your hand or anything. But what I have noticed in my 35 years of fundraising, when I go out and meet anybody new, or I go to a cocktail party and someone asks me about what I do and I say I'm a fundraiser, this is the response. That's awful. Well, why would you want to do that? I hate asking for money. But the truth is, and let me do this again. I hope this isn't too. Okay. When well done, the asking part of the development process, for me, in my experience, has been 5% of my time. 95% of the rest of my time is about relationship building. Now, I feel like at the feet of the masters at MIT. You'd think of MIT as this behemoth, assembly line sort of process. I started in the 80s. I don't know how it is now. It might be like that now. I have no idea. But I learned from very, very good fundraisers that it's about, again, that relationship building. We used to, when I was on the staff of the regional fundraisers, so we would travel all the time. So my territory was Chicago and Denver and 3 big cities in Texas. And we would all come back and we would tell stories about the people that we met on the road. And it was always so fascinating. And we love those people, and I did multi-million-dollar deals in Austin, like doing shots of tequila. I've been invited on the floor of the Mercantile Exchange in Chicago. We always used to say, like, we should make a sitcom out of this because the people are really so cool. And I've also been in the room, I've been present for someone who had made his first time major gift. I've been in the room when someone made their first time 7-figure gift. There have been tears, there has been smiling, there's been laughter. It's really, it can be, when done well and with heart, it could be it's a wonderful experience.
Janice, we did have one question come in, and it's about converting active Facebook audience to readers and subscribers. Is this something that you're going to address?
Yeah, we'll be talking about that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, okay. So to me, it's sort of a mindset issue. If we think about fundraising as purely transactional, we're thinking, okay, I have to raise this amount of money, and I have this number of members or prospects or whatever, and I need to make my budget. And so I need to just go out and get people to give us some money. That's one way of doing it. But when you're really thinking about, and especially the business that we're in, this nonprofit news, we're all in it because I think we're all in it because we're passionate about independent news, nonprofit news, and how it builds, it helps democracy and it builds community. And so that's what we're trying to get across. And that's what I really want you to be thinking about beyond the tactics. Any questions about that, about the difference between transactional and heart-based? Okay. Okay. So the first thing that we hope is that, and it's the most important element, is that what are we selling? The product that we're selling is they're really good ones, and they have connections to, again, building democracy, building community, letting people know about what's going on locally. And if that product is good, then the trick is to connect the fact that we're a nonprofit and we need those philanthropic gifts in order to get that product to continue. We at the Anchor had a little bit of an issue because it was a for-profit paper for over 20 years. And so people are in that mindset of, we sell ads and then we put out the paper. But when you saw the percentages of the revenue earlier, our tax deductible gifts are actually the majority of our revenue. So it's the central goal is to connect the fact that that we're a nonprofit and the fact that the product is really good. And so beyond that, when you're talking about messaging, think about that product. Why? Okay, why is it special? Why should people care about it? What would they do without it? Just trying to remind people about the importance of your product. 1 minute. Now, and we like to have fun at the Anchor. I've seen thousands of annual appeals, and now I've seen lots of ads and all of that. So many times they look like one size fits all. And we're always just trying to do something a little bit different, even in the email appeals and all of that, because everybody gets thousands of those emails. So, and you're with creative people. We're all working with creative people. So your editorial side, you're working with a bunch of writers, and so sort of capitalize on that as well. So, for example, this one in the middle, we send out about 250 mail. We call them subscriptions, but it's free to get mailed here in Harpswell. But we have a lot of summer people, and so we mail them to out-of-state addresses. And so I just do a little note every single time. And like this one, I wrote a haiku because we started a poetry a poetry story. This right in the middle, I don't sign that. I that's scanned in. But that's so easy to do. We again look at ways of messaging. Like we could just send out the letter, out the mailings, and they get the paper and they'll read the paper. That's fine. But just to stick in this little note with it, and I don't do that. This is something that we're going to be talking about in a minute. Is especially when you're short-staffed, especially when you're trying to do things on a shoestring, use volunteers as much as you can. And even volunteers who don't have anything to do with the paper, just citizens, because what usually happens, again, having volunteers is the same. You should have the mindset as asking for money. You're not saying, oh, please do me a favor. We love, it's more like they want to do that. They want to help out. And so you're offering them the opportunity to help. So this thing right here, right in the middle of it, that took me 2 minutes to write and maybe 10 minutes to print. And then also like little things in the ads, like I use it as a personal yellow page, as one reader told us. It's sort of a conversational style. The one on the right is an example of our e-blast that we send out once a month after the paper. It tends to be focused on the business, the nonprofit side of things. And then they look at the paper as the editorial. But, you know, again, if you read, it's just sort of a conversational tone, and people will pick that up, because if you take sort of a boilerplate, and if you don't like writing appeals, and if you don't like, you know, if that's hard for you, they'll get that across. You'll get that across to them. And so it's sort of like, it's a subtle difference, but there's a difference. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
We have a question in the chat. Danny Kington is asking, do you have any advice specifically for a startup where there isn't much to go on in terms of the existing product?
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't have that issue here because the thing existed before, but we were a startup in the fact that we were all newcomers. And in Maine, if you're from away, you've probably heard that term. They tend to not look at you. They tend to wonder who you are and what you're trying to do. What we did, and what I would recommend doing if you're in a startup, is we did an all-town questionnaire, a survey, and that worked out really well. We said, for us, what did you like about the anchor? What did you not like about the anchor? But you could ask, I mean, and this does cost money. This was a $5,000 mailer, and we had to raise money from the founders in order to do that. But if you want to get your vision across, and then sort of put it out there and say, you know, what do you think about this? And then ask them for contact information. Then you could, I mean, and it's a choice. You can add an ask in this mailing. And we specifically didn't want to do that. We just wanted to collect information. And we got, I think, 750 responses back on a 4,500 mailing. So this worked out really well. And we got a lot of email addresses. So then we put the email addresses in constant contact in our database. And that's how we started doing the fundraising. So we separated out the messaging from the ask, because, you know, the old adage, if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. And that sort of worked that way. But if you can look at it as this is all community building, and if you're doing something for the community, you want the community to be involved and to be engaged right off the bat. So that the other thing that we did was we collected $40,000 from the founders, and we let people know that the founders have seeded it, SEED, seeded it, and we're asking for the community to help with that.
Janice, Noreen Dworkin is asking, how did you get people to fill out the survey?
Yeah. Well, I can show, my information is at the end of this, and I can show you, I can send you the actual questionnaire. But it was, you know, the messaging on it was one page as the ask to have them fill it out. And then it was only one page, and it was 6 questions, and that's it. And then we let them, you know, had it open-ended. So that's one thing that you don't want to get people. And we did it online too. We did a mailing, but we allowed them to do it online too. But even if you're online, you don't want to fill out like a 40-page questionnaire. So that's one thing. And if you have a really short list, you could say in the beginning something like, you know, this isn't your everyday questionnaire, or, you know, I'll give you a penny if you fill it out. I mean, just sort of like fun things like that. The other thing that we did is we listed the founders on the front page, because even though we were all from away, you know, some of us have been here for a while. So people recognized the names of the founders, and that gave it huge gravitas, because we have 2 editors on the board. One of the founders is the biggest philanthropist in Harpswell, and everybody knows her name. And so if anything that you could put in there that would add gravitas would be another thing I would suggest. Okay. Okay. So again, we all have different levels of experience in development. But because I was sort of looking at this as my audience might be people who don't have a lot of time to focus on a comprehensive product, you know, a development team. You might not, it might be a quarter of your job. You might not have anybody to help. So I just wanted to say that anything else, you just start with these three building blocks. We talked about volunteers before. That's a really important piece because some of this stuff that I'll be talking about, like with a donor database and e-blasts, do require some data entry, but even data entry, you can get volunteers to do. We'll talk about a donor database in a minute. I'm hoping that you're all doing some kind of e-blast. We have decided that we only want to do it once a month because that's another thing that's annoying, that you get email all the time. We specifically decided that it's going to be focused, as I said earlier, on the nonprofit side. So we might do like a donor profile, or we've started to sell merchandise. So it's like, oh, look at these cool designs. We're getting people asking us, picking our brain about, you know, how we're doing this from all over the place. So we let people know that too. I'll let people know that I'm doing this today because that helps them, again, be really engaged and understand about what you're trying to do. And then we decided then we would just have a small editor's corner. So the editor would write maybe about like a new intern that we have for the summer, or he particularly liked writing this story and we do links back. That can be pretty easy to do. We have maybe 3 paragraphs in our e-blast, very short, conversational. It should be pretty easy to write up. And as far as distributing it, once you get the donor database set up, that's easy too. So you might want to think about, like, what are you trying to do? We do have house ads in our paper. So I do put in, we always have a donate, please donate. We will have a sponsorship page. We had our annual report in there, but for the most part, the paper is editorial. It's not a fundraising vehicle. So this is how we've decided to divide up that kind of messaging. Any questions on that?
Yes, we have a question from Renata Hill about volunteers. How many do you have and who manages them?
Good question. Right now, the people who have volunteered, who have raised their hands, this is not board members, this is not committees. We only have about 18 of them. But I'm going to have to build that up this summer. Right now, they're really helping us with our monthly mailings, those subscriptions. It's sort of basically stuffing envelopes, but we are doing a donor appreciation event at the end of August. And the theme is going to be something like, the foods of Harpswell. A lot of the restaurants and cafes are going to provide food for that. So I'm going to need volunteers to go out to those 10 restaurants and pick up the food and man the table. So I'm going to have to do more of a push on that. Volunteer management, and I have a feeling that the person who asked knows this by the nature of the question, but volunteer management does take work. And it does need someone to manage them, because, we think of volunteers and they help us, but you can't just sort of say, all right, go do this mailing or whatever. You always have to have somebody to manage them. And I'm the one who does that in this respect. If you can get a set of volunteers who come, every month. I know the local land trust has this. They do a lot of stuff by volunteers, and they have a core of volunteers who know what they're doing because they've been doing it for a long time. So they tend to take a little bit less time, but you do have to you do have to manage them. You have to make them feel good.
There's a question here also about volunteers. I'm Stephanie Courtney here, Chief of Growth Programs at INN. You mentioned using volunteers. Have you found that personalized notes from board members are effective?
For volunteers?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that personalized notes from board members are important across the board. And again, if you're looking at being on a shoestring, be creative about getting help from those volunteer or those board members as well. At the Harpswell Anchor, we're really lucky on a lot of respects. And one of them is that we have a very strong board and we have an activist board. So this would not work if we had board members who sort of just like to come to a monthly meeting and spout philosophical. So during Newsmatch, for example, anybody who made a gift of over $500 would get a call or a note from a board member. I didn't have time to do this, and it was better coming from a board member anyway. What I would also do, and this is a sort of an important little addition too, is that if you know something about that donor or something that board member might have in common, let the board member know that as well. So we send out a report that says, John Boomer will have these 3 people. This person, this is the second gift in 6 months or something. We just had something where we had one board member say to another one, oh, talk to that guy about your house because that guy used to live in your house. Just different things so what I ask the board members to do is to not just say, thank you very much, and say, thank you very much. And I understand that this is your second gift in 6 months. I'd love to talk to you about your philanthropy or whatever, or, oh, I understand you live down the street during the summer. Let's get together, just something that will start a conversation rather than, because if you get a thank you note without a question to it, that's it. But this can be a way of starting those kind of conversations, and the board members can do that kind of relationship building for you. So that's the sort of thing. Always be thinking of little additional things that you can do to make the donor know that we see him or her and we appreciate that gift, whether it's a $25 gift or a $2,500 gift. It's really important. Okay.
That's great, Janice. I have one more question from
Yep.
Mary Ung Sogard. I hope I got that right.
Mhm.
Do you have 2 email blasts, one for donors and one for news stories to audiences?
Yeah, we have the same audience. What we do is when you go online onto our website, there's a little thing that says, do you want to get updates when we update our website? So this goes back to a question that someone had about Facebook. We are on Facebook. About 75% of our traffic to our website comes from Facebook, because we have a regular schedule where all the articles that are in the print paper, we release to Facebook on a schedule during the month, so that people, and that reaches more people than just Harpswell. And we get a lot of shares too. So that's nice, because that means Harpswell people are sharing it with their friends. And so we try to drive traffic to the website from Facebook. And the other thing that we're really trying to do is, I heard someone say, and I love it, why free pays. We do a lot of things for free. Those subscriptions that I was talking about are free, because at first we were saying, okay, we could mail it for the old editor was mailing it for $30. And so we would say, okay, $30, that's about how much it costs. And lo and behold, people were giving us $30. But these people I knew could give us more money. So we experimented with, all right, let's just say that they're free and they're supported by tax deductible donations. And then what happened then is that people started getting, they didn't pay anything. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that experiment died. But then when Newsmatch came along, and we actually asked them for money, we didn't talk about the subscription. We didn't say, I know you're getting something for free, we just say, and they started giving money. And the average, I think we did, Deirdre, I don't know if you remember, I think it was about $229 was the average gift of a Newsmatch donor who had a free subscription. So that sort of works too. So going back to the e-blast, so if someone wants to be pinged with an email every time we update the website with a new story, they can. And they not only, they can, and all the PDF, that's another thing. The archives, all the PDFs are online. The old editor used to chart, there was a firewall, no firewall. Anybody can look at it at all. What we're really trying to do is get their email addresses, because then they're going to be connected and they're going to be engaged with the paper. They're not going to be asked for money. But then at the end of the year, when we ask them for money, they're like, oh, wow, I love this paper. And it's been so nice to get it in the mail. And we have a business marketing initiative that we're working with new businesses in Harpswell and giving them free marketing advice. We're not charging for that either. So what we're really trying to do is, again, build up that email address. So come Newsmatch, they'll be happy because the product is fabulous and they love the way that we are treating them. Again, this is easier to do in a small community. I have a big sign on my car saying Harpswell Anchor on the side of it. And we just got a big magnet, but I'm getting stopped all the time by people in the post office or the grocery store or whatever. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We actually have a board member who's always, she's so proud of herself. She always says to me, I started talking to that person and I said, they should give us money. And I said, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Get their email addresses, let the product speak for itself. And then when they're happy, we'll ask them for money. We're doing a donor event, a donor appreciation event here. We're inviting all donors, but it's not going to be an ask. I remember this board was really surprised about that because they're like, Janice, why are we, we have so many donors and we're doing Newsmatch and all this. Why do we want to do a fundraising event? And I said, no, I personally, we all have to do it, but I hate those kind of events where you get a little bit of food and drink and then you get a pitch and then they want you to take out their checkbook. Don't like that. We're having this all sponsored by other people. It's only there to say hello or to say thank you. Where our special guest is a man named Bill Nemitz, who is a very well-known in Maine Portland Press Herald columnist, and he just retired. And people love him, love him, and he has name recognition. He's just going to come and talk about the state of of journalism for 10 minutes. That doesn't cost anything. So we're really so anyway, I'm going off topic, but the answer is there are two different email. There's an e-blast that focuses on the nonprofit piece. And then there's the pings that people can sign up for the website. And we take all of those emails and put them together. So someone who's asked for a ping for the website update will be on the constant contact list. That could be a little bit, technically they didn't give us permission to get the e-blast, but using this, we do it this way. And we have about 1,200 people on our e-blast list now. I think we've lost 3 of them have unsubscribed in the last 6 months. So it sort of works.
That's great, Janice.
Okay.
I have another question here, just about a board. Does your current board contain legacy members from the old for-profit company, or did you engage all new members? If they're all new, what is the #1 tip you can give us recreating a board?
Interesting. We have people on the board and on the staff, 2 out of the 3, myself included, we were involved with the last anchor in that we wrote for the anchor. We were freelancers. But the old organization didn't have a board. It was one guy. And he would use a lot of freelancers. And we are using some of his old freelancers. But he was a one-person shop. So we didn't know. That said, we did pay for the brand and goodwill because people knew the anchor. We wanted to stay the anchor because of that continuity. The question about how do you build a board in the beginning, that's a really good one. And we got really lucky too in that we live in this community where there are a lot of newly retired people. So we have a lot of people on the board who have really good skills, like the skills you want on a board: marketing, business, legal, accounting, things like that. And the people had time to do it. When people come to us and say, you know, give us a checklist for what we need to start this thing up, I always say it's the people first, because I remember I put together this group of people in the very beginning to sort of start talking about this. And I remember saying to my husband, you know, I know what this is going to be like because I've done this before. We're going to get a whole lot of people together and everybody's going to bring their hands and they're going to say, oh my gosh, we're so sad that we don't have a local paper. And then no one's going to do anything about it. Total opposite. Everybody's like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. Somebody on this call right now, a board member, it runs a whole grants committee. They do all the grant writing. You know, it's great because I don't have to do it. But if it's small or large, you got to go out and find people who are going to put the work into it. A startup nonprofit is the same as a startup business. We were working 24/7. We had board members who were working 40 hours a week in the beginning. And so to be really clear about that in the beginning, and maybe you only get 3 people who would do that, but 3 worker bees are much better than 10 that aren't going to do that much, because you don't have that time. You know, we were approached by a group in Connecticut who, you know, already they seem like when they tell us about this board that they put together, there's already infighting, there's already bickering. You got to get some like-minded people. And besides that, I don't know. I mean, it's, you know, just get the word out, as many people as you possibly can. The president of our board, I had never even met before. I didn't know anything about him. And he's, you know, he just came, he volunteered, he came to the table. Okay.
Janice, on your slide here on this topic for the donor database, we do have a few questions about that.
Okay.
Shannon,
can I do just a little presentation on this slide and then we'll take the questions for that?
for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So you need to have a donor database, no matter what. It takes a lot of time in the beginning to get all of this information in, but again, use volunteers to do this. I started, I mean, I do this. I mean, I learned it at MIT that it can save you so much time. We use Little Green Light, which I tend to like. It's very inexpensive, $45, I think, a month for up to 2,500 records. I like Little Green Light because it's really simple. You can go out there and get expensive donor databases that are good for every organization that would ever need it. Hence, having a lot of bells and whistles. And you need to sort of have someone who knows databases to do it. I don't know anything about databases, but I've been able to figure this out in, you know, without any training. So but you do need it, because if once everything's in there and you see these are just some of the fields that we have filled in, especially with acknowledgement letters. Acknowledgement letters is, again, one of my bugaboos is to get a donor or an acknowledgement letter that is obviously boilerplate and there's no personalization to it at all. Okay, so you say, I'm in a small organization and I can't afford the time or effort that it takes to tailor letters. Well, you do if you set it up well on the database. So for example, see the groups, I have an explanation point because it's the most important thing, I think. So you can draft up a template, an acknowledgement template that says something completely different to a volunteer as it is to just a regular donor or to a committee member or to a member, any of those things. You can, once the information is in there, you can slice and dice it any way that you want to. The database can fill in templates for you. You can develop those templates, but you have to have, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you want to make sure that all of your members or your volunteers are getting this, but you forgot to put in that they're volunteers, it's not going to come out. But if you get all of those things filled in, or you can even do like with the gift amount, you could do a special template for people who give over $250, for example. When I was at the Athenaeum, we would send, we had a modular acknowledgement letter. We had 3 paragraphs. And the first one identified whether you were a past donor. The second one was if you were involved like with a children's library or a reading group. And then the third one was an invitation to come if they live close. So we'd have all these different combinations, and we didn't do it. The database did it for us. So I just wanted to underscore that. I know that it's something that is really hard to complete, but if you get volunteers and you have them sign a privacy agreement, because they're going to be dealing with, private information, and you trust them, and you use them to do that data entry in the beginning. Okay, so now I'll take questions about the database.
A question is, does it link into Mailchimp and your website?
Yes, it does. The Constant or Little Green Light, and most of them do this. They do integrate with Constant Contact and Mailchimp. But the thing about it is you can push the information, the contact information from Little Green Light to Constant Contact, but Constant Contact doesn't push it back. So it's a glitch. You have to go to Constant Contact, and if they've unsubscribed, you have to go back to your database and unsubscribe them. So it's not totally seamless. But we're also coordinated and integrated with our gift system and Constant Contact and the website. So when you go online and you want to make a gift, or you click on that link from an e-blast, it'll go to a giving form that integrates with the database. So I look at the end of the month, I just did 10 gift processes. And if the person is already in there, and it says this Joe Blow gave $25 yesterday online, you just click on save, and it populates that whole gift stuff for you. It automatically does it. So, and then you can pick your acknowledgements from that gift site, and that integration did take a little bit of time in the beginning. I had to sort of think, I'm not a technical person. I can get around a computer, but that integration took some time to set up in the beginning. But once it's up and running, it's really invaluable.
Thank you. And we have another question from Julie Dreisen. How many donors do you have, and what is the average gift?
Good question. I know that we have 768 donors, and I normally would not know that to a donor, but I'm doing the invitation list for our donor appreciation. So I know we have 768. You know what? I have not done an average gift. I would say off the top of my head, it's between $50 and $100. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else before we move on?
I think that's it. We've got about 13 minutes left.
Yeah, thanks for the time check. Oh, this is another thing. I'm going to skip that one, but this one's good. All right. So going back to your acknowledgement letters. So also what the database does for me is that if someone writes in, they're making an online gift, and they write a note saying, I love that story about that house that you did, or we're new to Harpswell, or whatever, it populates that person's record as well on Little Green Light. So when we do acknowledgements, and that's all automated, and as I've said, you can still tailor them, but that's all automated. When I go to sign them, I have a piece of paper that has all of these gift notes that have automatically been populated. So it just gives me a way to, I just don't sign it, but I say, like this, may she sail a long time. I love that. So I wrote, may she sail a long time. I love that. Can I quote you? And that's just something really easy to do, because you just have to print it out. So it's another one of those things that you get a lot of bang for your buck, because the person really knows that you're talking to him or her, and it doesn't take that much time. Any questions on that one? Okay.
We have Aaron O'Mara. who you may know.
I do.
She says, Erin from the Anchor Board here. A key to successful outreach is understanding what the product is and what it means to the community. What is the value proposition and how is it best communicated? Janice is excellent at this. She's able to authentically connect with our community because she cares about the Anchor and the people who read it. Though Janice is one of a kind, everyone can do this.
Thank you, Erin. I love you. We have a great board. But again, this goes back to like this whole idea of transactional fundraising versus heart-based fundraising. And people will pick up and know the difference. And again, we're in a small community, so word travels fast, but the message is getting out that we are really nice, friendly people who are doing a lot for the community, and people are responding. But it's so easy to get into that transactional piece when you're just trying to get through. And by the way, again, going back to the database, if you want to experiment with trying to do this heart-based with 10 of your best prospects, mark them off as your best prospects. And then the database can also do this moves management thing. I don't know if that's a term that people are familiar with, but it's fairly common in fundraising circles, that if you could do to-do lists too. You could say, like, we're in our first year, so it's about time to do some reporting on our grants. Last year, when we got our first grant in August, I put in a date on that person's record saying July 1, report on that grant. If I hadn't written that down, I wouldn't remember it. And the database could also, you could put in a date, and if you have 10 things that you've told yourself that you wanted to do with these individuals, it'll tell you. So use that as well. And if you don't want to, again, if you don't have enough time to do this across the board, experiment with a group of people and say, these are the people who I think is going, has in a time of limited resources and personnel, these are the people that I can focus on, and do it that way. Okay. So now, all of this said, and this is, I have 2 more slides, but that's sort of my presentation. We could have other questions about that. But what I wanted to do a pitch right now is for putting money into development staff. So rarely are editorial skills and development skills, you rarely can you find it in the same person. We have a very strong wall between what JW, our editor, does and the money that's coming in that I do. So we don't have to deal with, someone saying, well, I'm, your biggest advertiser, so I want you to come in and, write about our business. It doesn't go that way. If JW has questions about revenue, gifts, and advertisement, he sends them to me, and vice versa. We're lucky to have the resources in order to do that. That said, it was, I had mentioned a couple of, when these people have been coming and sort of picking our brain about what's going on. This one group, they were asking me all of these questions, and JW, the editor, was on the phone with us on Zoom. And JW, who has a wonderful, he has a wonderful sense of humor that you hardly ever pick up. But he says, I'll tell you the answer to all these questions. You need to hire a director of development. And because often boards don't necessarily have those skills, we directors of development can be expensive. None of us are making that much money here. They're lucky in that I'm sort of pre-retired, so I need to make a salary. But I have to tell you, I was making 9 times more than what I'm making now when I was in Boston. So it's a little bit of a labor of love. But the reason why directors of development can be expensive is because we are a cost center. We're also a revenue center. So what you're really looking for are people who are truly frontline. They're people, not someone who can, okay, you're going to manage our news match program, so you're going to just do the data entry, or you're going to get the volunteers and board to do it, but you're not going to do it yourself. to me, you're just adding money. But if you can get an outwardly focused person and you say to them, okay, our budget is now $200,000. We'll give you $100,000, but you're going to have to increase that by $150,000. Like, don't, just make sure that people know that they're not coming on just to do, transactional stuff. They need to increase the revenue that pays for their salaries in addition to everything else. So this is sort of my pitch to you and your boards about investing in fundraising. If we had put this on our editor, or if you had asked me to edit a paper and do what I'm doing at the same time, it would not work.
Janice, we have a question from Celia Wu about structure. Does development report to editor-in-chief or vice versa?
Yes.
Or do you both report to the board?
Yes, good question. We both report to the board. JW and I consider ourselves as co-directors of the Harpswell Anchor. So we're two parts of a leadership role. And again, we have the resources to be able to do that. And I hope that your organizations can do that too. In the beginning, the board, I was one of the founders. So I went through this transition from being interim president of a fledgling board to now the director of development and operations. So I was on the board when we were thinking about this, and the original thought was, you don't want to have, the board only wants to have one report. That's how it usually is the CEO or the head. But because we really wanted to split up these functions, we really focused and we decided to do those double reports. So JW and I both attend the editorial or the board meetings, and we both do our own report. And we also both manage the administrative assistant / designer. So his name is Sam, and Sam reports to both of us.
Great. Jason asks about funding for that staffer. Jason, would you like to speak? Oh, that's a question. Well, if you do have a question, go ahead and put that in the chat. But go ahead and continue, Janice.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that there's Report for America that everybody and his brother is applying to. We're actually going to look into that. But we also were lucky in that we rode that wave of people really wanting the anchor back. So because we did so much fundraising last year, all the money that we're raising this year is going to go to next year. So we do have that that kind of cushion, and the board has put aside a certain amount every year for personnel contingencies, especially for freelancers. The paper is now up to 40 pages. It started at 20. And at the beginning, JW, the editor, was writing most of the articles and was having a hard time finding freelancers. But since then, now he has a really good stable of freelancers. And he wanted, originally, I think we only had like a $400 or $500 freelance budget. Now it's up to about $1,000, because he came and said to the board, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I need freelancers to fill up these pages. If we don't have that money, we'll just go to a shorter paper. So you should probably get the money up front for the position. There has been talk about people hiring fundraisers and them going on commission. It's actually frowned upon in nonprofit circles. It's not, and that's another thing that's sort of a transition from for-profit to not-for-profit, is that a lot of for-profit companies do that, with ad sales and whatever, but it's a nonprofit, and it's a practice that's done, but it's sort of frowned upon. So I wouldn't go that route. But again, I would make it clear that you're looking for someone who's going to grow the revenue, is not going to just be transactional. With that, I know we just have a minute or two, but I wanted to say that here's my contact information. I love talking about shop and I love mentoring. I was lucky enough to be mentored by some pretty incredible people at MIT when I was in my 20s. So I feel like this is how I want to give back. I would love to answer any questions that people have. But I do say call ahead for an appointment because I'm really, I'm really busy. But if you wanted to call or email and say, I would like to talk with you for 15 minutes about this question or about these two questions, I've learned because we've been asked to give people our case our case study, and I have somebody, I won't mention their names or their location, but I have someone who's calling all the time, and I sort of have to limit it. So yeah, but that said, if you do have any other questions and you want to talk to me, there's my email address, my phone number, and feel free to do that. I have worked from some pretty amazing places, but I've never worked in some place that I'm so passionate about, because we are all making a really big difference in a world that is crazy now, crazy. And so we just have to keep up with what we're doing, because it's helping inform people and build a better society.
Janice, can we plug the news fundraising community Slack channel that you are
Oh,
also
yes.
accessible on? That's another great place to get in touch with Janice and really other development professionals in journalism.
Yeah.
With your questions. And Janice is always posting questions and gathering answers from newsrooms to sort of share ideas across the network.
Yes. And I also, with the Slack channel, if someone is asking on the INN listserv, the general listserv, if there's a fundraising question, I copy and paste it and I put it on Slack because that's specifically for fundraising. So yeah, there are a lot of ways that we can all connect through INN.